Hello and welcome to CBN News, our continuing coverage of President Trump's inauguration. This is the second time he has done it. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we have a new president. My name is Dan Andros, managing editor with CBN, joined this afternoon by CBN's Billy Hallowell and Goins-Phillips. Gentlemen, how's it going?
Doing well.
Good. Happy to be here.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about, as David Brody just mentioned here on our last stream. And thank all of you for being here, by the way. So glad you're here. Make sure you let us know in the chat. Just tell us where you're from. I mean, more chats going, more people will see the stream, more people will see CBN News, and we'd love to have that. So tell us where you're watching from in the chat, and we'll shout out as many as we can. Give us your questions in the chat, your comments, things that you saw that you would like to talk about from today. But as David Brody just mentioned, this whole thing about his hand not being on the Bible, that one you got to take with a grain of salt here, I would think, guys, given that probably the people complaining about it don't really care for the Bible so much. So, a little bit of hypocrisy there. But nevertheless, we've got a new president, and the speech is getting a lot of praise online. What was your guys' reaction to it?
I think that the speech was remarkable in that you do not see people lay out everything they're going to do essentially in a list, right? And you specifically don't see people do that in front of the person that they're trying to correct all of the wrongs they believe were wrong. I mean, Biden was sitting right behind him as he was detailing that. So I think the extent of what he was saying and the fact that he was criticizing with those statements the person sitting right behind him, but doing it in a way that made sense politically, not the typical sort of rambunctious way that he sometimes does, that was really interesting to watch.
Yeah, and I think, what did Brody say? This was the longest inaugural address since FDR, right? So, I think, which is telling, because both FDR and Trump, I think something they each have in common is both of them are kind of populist characters, right? They're people that appeal to, I think, just the general population in a way that a lot of presidents in the past haven't done. I think a lot of our presidents have been, full of pomp and circumstance. They've kind of been creatures of Washington, D.C. or of politics. And I think that Trump, for all of the caricature surrounding who he is, I think he very much is relatable to the everyday man and woman in the country, right? I think his instincts are very much relatable. And I think that probably played into why he spoke for so long, and as you said, Billy, why he spoke really just freely about what he's planning to do as president. I don't think a lot of those ceremonial traditions really rise to the top of his mind. I think he just speaks his mind, and I think that is obviously what has made him such a successful politician in this latest Trump era of American politics. But I think that certainly informed why he chose to speak the way that he did, just laying out from top to bottom what is his agenda going to be as president.
All right, I want to do this now. Crutch, Dan Crutchfield, our producer, manning the switching and everything else here. Can you go to whitehouse.gov, Crutch, when you get a sec, and call that up? Because this is something that you kind of forget about in the transition, that the White House page is going to change, and it has changed, and it's awesome in a lot of ways. At least in my, you'll see. I want to get everyone else's reaction. I'm just smiling because of this the page. I don't know. There's like an animation that comes up first. Just tell me ahead of time, Crutch, before you're ready. I want to stop and let. Okay. All right. Yeah. Just wait until you're ready and then tell me, because this is great. I'm sure. Look, a lot of you can go over to it now, to the website. Okay. We're ready. All right. Let's take a look at the new White House website. So there's no sound with it, but this is what rolls when you go to the website. This is the whitehouse.gov. So you have that video that's going that just pops up and just kind of rolls, and then it should settle in here. There it is. So you can get rid of the lower third there for a second, Crutch, so everybody can see there it is. It's Trump pointing with a smile. It said America is back. And that's what I was smiling at, because that popped up on my screen as I was telling you guys about the new website. So there you go. And look, that was the theme of the, you can bring that lower third back up, Crutch. the theme of the speech in a lot of ways. It wasn't exactly like the shining city on the hill, and I feel like as great as Reagan was, calling back to Reagan, it just seems like it had been done so many times that it just wasn't resonating anymore in the last few years, and so it's like people need a new message. And I really think Trump was tapping into that today with his talking about a national renewal, talking about, the restoration of justice, talking about things we're going to do here. And the golden age of America begins right now, he said. And that these are like exciting things. And, we're used to the back and forth and the bickering, right? And so I think that the website imagery and some of the quotes he talked about, I think you can see, he's certainly aiming for a vision of prosperity and things of this nature, and trying to articulate that as well.
Yeah, and I think speaking to the needs and the wants of the people, right? You had an election where there were more than 2 million vote disparity between the two candidates. People were very clear. They're not happy with the direction. They're not happy in a number of the issues, from the economy down the line, the gender issue. He hit on a lot of the things that I think led to his victory, because they were things that the other side was not handling well. And not only were they not handling them well, but they were not addressing them. You can keep telling people it's a good economy all day long, that there are jobs, that things are wonderful, but when the facts on the ground are not lining up to that, that becomes a real problem. And so I think what we saw here was, the president really detailing and hitting those marks. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why he was elected. We'll see if he can live those things out in his policy making, because that's going to be what really matters. This is day one. In 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, are we going to see policies that actually do reflect those sentiments?
Yeah, I think you make a ton of promises on Inauguration Day, and whether or not you live up to them is something that is going to remain to be seen. Obviously, you have to then work. You're the president. You're one branch of the government. You have to then work with Congress to make all of these things actually happen. So all of the negotiation, the deal making, all of those backdoor meetings, that all starts to happen now. Can you bring all of these big promises into fruition? I think three things that really stuck out to me in this speech. One was not even anything Trump said, and it might not be anything significant, but I thought it was interesting that he was wearing a purple tie. He wasn't wearing a red tie. He wasn't wearing a blue tie. He was wearing a purple tie, obviously a blend between the two colors. So I don't know if that was maybe supposed to be a little show of unity there. If it was, I think that's encouraging and definitely an aspirational thing for him to have done. Another thing, of course, that I thought was interesting to see and encouraging to see was, as president, him saying, among a bunch of other things, specifically saying as commander-in-chief, there are two sexes, right? There's male and female. I thought him drawing that distinction was interesting to hear from the president of the United States, because I think policies and culture and all of that is set from the top down. So what he says, I think, obviously there's not going to be any law around it necessarily, but what he says certainly is going to dictate how law is then crafted. So I think that set an important tone. And then also something that kind of was quickly, gone through in his speech, but I thought was interesting and noteworthy and certainly worth talking about was him saying that he's going to give back pay to members of the military who were kicked out or forced out due to not taking the COVID vaccine. So those are just a few things that I think really, even now reflecting back, kind of stick out in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did ask a question of the chat, by the way, if you're just joining us. Thanks so much for being here. There's 7,000 of you in here right now, which is awesome. But make sure you hit the like button before you do anything else here, because we got 300 likes. We can get that thing up. More people will see it. More people will see CBN News, and that'll be a good thing. So more people will be hanging out in the chat with us. But we have a lot of people in the chat here from all over the place: New Mexico, Virginia Beach, Minnesota, Australia. Let's see where else. Pennsylvania, Canada. So a lot of places there. I see in the comments, I'm sorry, I'm scrolling through all these to try to find it. I saw someone said, I like the transparency. That was Lord Peanut II, which we'll get an explanation on your name at some point in time. I love the usernames, by the way, so it always cracks me up. But So Lord Peanut, there you go. He said that he liked the transparency on it. I saw other people saying great speech in general. Let's see if we can find some more. Very relatable. Good. It was longer. It was important. Some of the chats here from you guys in the chat on the speech. So there you go. And oh wow. And I see it just updated on me. Now there's a lot of things. San Diego, California, New Zealand, everyone giving their shout out. Thanks so much for doing that. Thanks for hitting the like button as well. I see that climbing. So keep weighing in. And if you have a question or comment, just put it in caps or something. We'll see if we can try to get to it on the president's speech, that is. So appreciate you guys being here. On the protest front, guys, I was very curious, for one, to see how many protests there would be, if any. And in looking around on the X and on social media, I haven't seen too many. I saw a video of one, and I don't have it open in front of me, but it didn't look very well attended. I mean, maybe a few dozen people, maybe 100 at most, but certainly not an intense presence. If you guys remember in 2017, in January of 2017, when Trump was inaugurated the first time, there was essentially a full meltdown in the streets, happening, of people crying out and making these, shows of emotion in the street over the election of Donald Trump and the swearing in of Donald Trump at that time. And there were some protests and riots and people looting and smashing windows of stores and things of that nature. But that doesn't appear to have happened this time yet. And if it has, it has not crossed my radar on social media, and I've been looking for it. So it's also ridiculously cold outside, so maybe the protesters just didn't want to brave the cold. They didn't care about the issue that much to say, you know what, I'm really, it's too cold, never mind. So not a lot on the protest front, guys. Does that surprise you at all?
Yeah, it doesn't really surprise me, because I think we're watching this weird renaissance right now go on in terms of information and how information is spread. And I think for a long time, the media, the mainstream media, were trusted, right? People trusted them. They listened to them. If we've learned anything this past year, and this can be dangerous too, by the way, and this is why media bias is such a problem, because you want to be able to trust the media, that what they're telling you is true and accurate. When you no longer trust the media, you're not willing to listen. And I think you have seen people realize there's a bias, that they've not been treating everybody fairly when it comes to candidates, when it comes to cohorts in this country. Conservatives and Christians in particular have complained about this for a long time. So because of that, I think you're actually seeing a lot of people wake up and say, hey, maybe I didn't have the full story. Now, I'm not saying there won't be protests. I'm not saying, I think that, we've turned this corner where nobody is going to protest Trump. But I do think there's a realization that maybe people didn't have the full story. And also team that with the fact that people have not had as much income. They've had higher prices, even if they have more income to contend. When you hit people in their pocketbooks, I think they start to look at the other issues and they become secondary, right? They don't become as important as the economy, as gas prices, as food prices, as energy prices, the things that people are struggling to, the basics that you have to have. So I think my point is there has been a shift, and I think there are fewer people as angry and concerned. And by the way, one more thing, Trump has already had a 4-year term, and it wasn't this disaster that it was promised to be. And so you take those factors together, and I think you end up with a little bit more calmness this time.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't know exactly what has led to this shift that we've seen in our culture. I think there are a number of things, certainly the economy, and then even some of the maybe mainstream cultural influences, especially when it comes to things like sexuality. I think a lot of those things have colored sort of this cultural shift that we're seeing. But I think to your point, Billy, we are seeing this renaissance. I think we're stepping into an age when republicanism, conservatism is kind of the gritty, rebellious thing to do. And that was not always the case, right? It used to be the complete other way around. It was the Republican conservative view that was kind of the establishment view. And it was cool, especially if you're younger, to be more progressive, to kind of buck the system and vote for Democrats. And I think that coin has flipped the other way around. And I think Trump is largely responsible for that, because he came in as this inexperienced, brash TV personality. And I think a lot of people at the time, and Democrats at the time, were able to capitalize on that. He's a complete unknown. We have no idea who it is that we're handing the keys to the country to. He could absolutely blow this whole thing up, and he ended up being a fairly, he's Donald Trump, so he's going to be brash and all of those things. But policy-wise, he ended up not being as radical as all of these warnings about him suggested he was going to be. So I think none of that argument against Trump worked when it came to his reelection campaign this time. And I think because there's been so much frustration over a lot of the political pushes and cultural pushes from the left that they've maybe pushed a bit further than they should have. They had some runway and some leeway culturally, and I think they overstepped what that runway and leeway was. And this has kind of been the response to it, which is, like I said, made conservatism and republicanism a little bit of the rebellious, cool thing to do, which is interesting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks so much again for everybody being here. If you're just joining us, I see now a couple more thousand of you have joined the chat. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it. My name is Dan Andros. I'm a managing editor of CBN News, joined right now by Billy Hallowell, Trey Goins-Phillips, also of CBN News. And we will be joined in a few minutes by CBN chief political analyst David Brody. And I look, the buzz right now, at least just kind of trending on social media right now. And the conspiracy theorists are going to go into full gear on this one. I'm interested to get David's take as well as your guys on this about. And as soon as we have the clip here, we'll play it in a minute. But Trump, when he took the oath of office there, he apparently everyone's saying he didn't put his left hand on the Bible, and you can see Melania is behind him, like from this camera view. When we get to the clip, you'll see that, and you actually can't see his hand from this camera view that I'm looking at right now. So we'll look around and see if we can get a good view of the clip to where you can actually see his left hand, because the Bibles are in the camera shot that I'm having. It's Trump. As Trump is looking to the right of the camera, Chief Justice Roberts facing him, and then Melania is sort of like behind him, and she's kind of blocked by him. And you can see like the edge of the Bibles. You can see his right hand up, but you can't see his left hand where it's at. And people are saying he didn't put it on there. And so, obviously he's taking the oath. And I mean, I don't know. I'm gonna wait and see on this one. This is how I play these things. Everyone starts going around and saying stuff. I'm not gonna just say what happened until we actually get confirmation on it. We'll even see what I'm sure Trump will say something about it at some point. But once, it's up on okay, it's up on our feed right now. Okay. Oh, you've got a link to it in the chat. Is that where you put it? Or okay,
yeah,
in there. Yeah,
and there are a number of headlines about this now too. Trump did not place his hand on the Bible, according to the New York Post, ABC News. So there's some outlets that are beginning to cover that.
Yeah, I think some of that really, just before you move on with the conversation there, Dan, I think some of it seemed like there was a little bit of confusion, right? Melania came up a little bit late, and then the oath had already started. So I think it probably was, again, like you said, we don't know until we know, and Trump will absolutely likely say something about it. But it seems more than anything to have just been a confusion of steps to take and when to take those steps, right? I think it was a little bit rushed because the oath needed to take place for him to be sworn in as president. I think it was just probably, a little bit of a misstep in timing there more than anything.
Yeah, exactly. Same here.
Well, and also,
go ahead, Billy, and then I want to bring in David.
Up late. I wanted to clarify this. She came up late, Melania.
Right. Yeah.
And then you also had a couple of other factors in the process, of this that I think made it a little confusing. But it's not required constitutionally that somebody's hand be on the Bible. I think it's important we drive that home.
Yeah. All right, let's bring in CBN chief political analyst David Brody. David, your thoughts on everything we just saw, David. We saw and listened to the now president again, President Trump's speech. And as we were talking about, aspirational in a lot of ways, really flipping the script on the last 4 years, particularly as Trey was talking about with the gender stuff. And really, it's kind of crazy to think, guys, that, particularly from a Christian perspective, as we know God made us male and female, to think we're living in a time where you can get your passport changed to say, Zhe or something like that. It's just or just switch your gender or whatever. It's just insane that a basic biological fact is being like thrown into the air, and that the government went along with it. But Trump's looking to course correct on that. So that was just one part of the speech. David, some of the highlights for you.
Well, I've got a lot. I got to turn off all my notifications. I'm getting a few here, guys. Well, a couple of things. First, on the Bible situation, yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of questions about that, just from a curiosity standpoint. But I agree with you.
Will he do it again? Can I interrupt? Will he do it again? Is there a chance he does it again?
Does what again?
I don't know. Just take the oath. If they think it was an invalid oath. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant a third term. I'm sorry.
No. I'm talking about just on the Bible thing. Does he just go and redo it just to make sure it calms everyone down?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, he might. Then again, he's unconventional. So who the heck knows? But no. And Billy's exactly right. There's nothing in the Bible. Listen to me. The Constitution that requires you to have your hand on the Bible. As a matter, John Adams wasn't sworn in on a Bible. He was sworn in on a law book, a book of law at the time. And Theodore Roosevelt didn't even use a book. And then I think there was one more, just got to remember, but anyhow, I'm sorry, Dan, what were you going to say?
Well, I kind of was, it's all coming back to me, right? All this stuff happens, but I was like, didn't somebody recently redo the oath? And I just Googled it real quick, and Obama retook the oath. Because remember, he stumbled at one of his inaugurations. He stumbled over something, and they did it out of a, quote, abundance of caution. There wasn't obviously a ceremony or anything. He just went and before Roberts and did the same thing. So anyway, I digress.
Well, look, I mean, I've got a lot to say. I have a lot to say. That sounds about right. I know my family. So I'm not quite sure what everything that's been said here, but I'll just say this. I mean, it was a Maga rally at the Capitol. I mean, that's what it was. I mean, this idea that it was a Trump address to the nation, not really. No, it was a State of the Union, the way Donald Trump sees it, at the Capitol. It was the longest speech in modern history since FDR, 29 minutes and I believe 38 seconds. You may have talked about this, a lot of this stuff already, so I apologize for any of this. So now in terms of words, maybe not, but in terms of time, yes, that's double the time that he spent on his first inaugural address. That was only about 15 minutes or so. This one was, like I said, almost 30 minutes. And he had a lot to say after 4 years being in the air quote wilderness, if you will. I mean, think about it. 2 assassination attempts. 2 impeachments, 34 felony convictions, January 6th, a media nonstop against him. And you put all that together and think about it, guys. He won 63 million votes in 2016. In 2024, he won 77 million votes. I mean, think about that. All of that, and he had 14 million more votes. It's just, I always think of my 1986 Mets as the comeback kids. Forget that. Donald Trump puts them to shame. This is the political comeback of all time. But look, I thought it was a very serious speech. I've never seen a speech like this in modern inaugural history. Why? Because it was policy centric, specifically with executive order after executive order, like what he was going to do. And it wasn't sweeping. It wasn't esoteric. It wasn't pie in the sky. It wasn't hold hands and can we all just get along a la Rodney King in 1991. It wasn't anything like that at all. I mean, it was straight up Donald Trump with a serious expression. I thought of his portrait the entire time because he was very serious and it was extremely powerful, I thought. You put it all together. I'm just looking at some of my notes because, at my age, I got to take notes. But it said, just specifically here, the golden age of America begins now. That was a big deal, obviously. America's decline is over. I thought the most powerful line was, my life was saved by God to make America great again. I mean, that was obviously a big line. But honestly, and there were other lines as well, I thought on his comeback, he said, here I am, the American people have spoken. That was pretty powerful. But out of everything that he said, when he said this line, and this line's not going to get the headlines, but I thought it was fascinating. He said, this is a revolution of common sense. And the reason I think that was a big deal was because that's the pulse of MAGA. That's the pulse of what Trump's talking about. That's why African Americans and Hispanics and Democrats and liberals and Republicans and conservatives, all across, why he has been able to kind of mesh everything and everyone together and why he's blurred the lines, because there is a common sense factor. I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat, animal, vegetable, or mineral. When you look and you see what Donald Trump was talking about, a lot of people are going, yeah, just kind of makes sense. Just kind of makes sense. And that's really what it is. And so I've always thought that that's been the common denominator of why this is fused together. If it was partisan, it would never have been fused together. But it's never been partisan. It's always been very common sense-ish, if you will. And then one last thing. I also thought it was interesting. I keep saying one last thing. How many one last things can I have? Yeah, the two genders, obviously male and female. That's a big deal. I thought Franklin Graham was a little in your face today. I mean, you know, when he said the last 4 years were pretty dark as Biden's sitting there. And then he says, but look what God has done. We give him glory. Oh, my goodness gracious. I thought that was a kind of a yikes moment. And on the Panama Canal, one last thing. He said, we didn't give it to China. We gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back. Now, a lot of people think that means militarily, or he's going to take the Panama Canal by storm, and we're going to see the 82nd Airborne in there. I don't think that's what he's talking about. I think he just wants an equitable deal. Everything for him is the art of the deal. So this idea that we're going to take it back just may mean that we're going to take it back to make it fair, to make sure America is not getting, you know, as Trump would say, played for a sucker, ripped off. And I think that that's a little bit more what he's talking about. Now, if it doesn't change and he can't get the deal that he wants, well, then all bets are off, and maybe we'll send the 82nd Airborne in there. I don't know. But the point is that I don't think that necessarily means we're going to take it back militarily, though if it comes to that, who knows? Then we're having another YouTube discussion.
You know, I've got to ask you, because there's so much excitement among Republicans right now, and among others who wanted to see Trump win. He gave this speech. Everybody's rah, rah, rah right now. But what will it take, David, for him to be successful as a president in a second term? Because all of this is unconventional. What is he going to have to do to land that plane?
Well, that's a great question, Billy. And here's the answer. No, I have no answer. That's the problem. We don't know exactly what this is going to look like, because Donald Trump was not, and everything that Donald Trump does isn't in a test tube, right? We can't have an experiment and say this is going to be the result, because we just don't know. There's so many wild cards. But I would say this, that I think ultimately, if he keeps with that common sense kind of look, this is just basic stuff, and not really worry too much about the politics of it all. You know, this time around, Donald Trump is not enamored with the liberal media as much as he has been in the past. And to be clear, he's got a chip on his shoulder. Actually, he's got a boulder on his shoulder. And he actually wants the approval, has wanted the approval of the New York Times and other places in the past. This time around, it's different. It's just no nonsense, get down to business. So when all of the immigration stories that are going to crop up when he does mass deportations, and the liberal media is going to run with, families that are broken up, even though there will be a criminal amongst them, a convicted criminal amongst them, we're going to hear a lot of that. I think he's going to stay focused. And if he stays focused on what he's trying to do, I think ultimately people will understand that he's trying to do good for all of America. And let's remember, Billy, I'm really not giving you an answer, by the way. But Billy, he has a mandate, right? And we keep talking about this mandate. What does that even mean, a mandate? Well, some people will say 312 electoral votes. I don't think that's the mandate. Some people will say he swept all 7 swing states. That's not the mandate. The mandate is, out of the 50 states, he improved his vote total from 2020 to 2024 in 49 of the 50 states. In California, he had the biggest jump. In New York, in New Jersey, all of these places, hundreds of thousands of more people voted for him in liberal states. He didn't win the liberal state, but they voted for him. That is the mandate. The mandate is across all states, kind of like Reagan-Mondale, except he didn't win the states. Of course, Reagan won 49 of 50 back in 84. But it's similar in the sense that today, you're never going to have a president win 49 of 50 states. This is probably the closest you're going to get, the fact that his vote total went up in 49 of 50 states. That, to me, suggests that people want common sense. And so the answer, I guess, ultimately, roundabout way, and a lot of verbal, dare I say, can I say it, verbal diarrhea. But after all of that, I think the answer is that if he sticks to the plan and goes with common sense, he'll get more people to buy into what he's doing. And quite frankly, if they look at their paycheck and have a little bit more money, and economically it turns around, I think that'll be a good thing.
All right, I'm just jumping in real quick, Trey, before your cue. Thank you, everybody who's in here. I mean, up to 13,000 now. And you guys just keep hitting the like button, because that really does help get us in the algorithm and whatnot. We got 1,400 likes now. Let's see if we can get that even higher. And that helps more people see it. More people see CBN News. And David, you made a comment about the mainstream media running things. And, one thing that this is something you have to keep in mind when you're digesting news. What is the narrative and the purpose and what is driving them? We always see the history headlines for almost every other candidate, Democratic candidate, not for Republican candidates. And I didn't know this. I knew it was rare, but I didn't know it was this rare. For a U.S. president to get 2 terms non-consecutively, only one other president had done that, Grover Cleveland. And so it's an interesting thing, right? It means they either lost or didn't run for some reason, but then tried to go again. It just doesn't happen a lot. So it's interesting to me that I don't think I've seen very many headlines, if any, anywhere talking about this historic presidency, right? And so that's just something I want to throw out to you all as food for thought, just as you're consuming the news. Think about how they could present things, not just what they present to you, because what they're presenting to you is sort of the narrative they want you to see. But Trey, go ahead. I had to get on my soapbox for a minute on that one, but go ahead.
Yeah, David, a question that I have, just because I've seen so much social media chatter about it, so I want to get your thoughts, is the fact that, and this is more kind of like gossip and drama type stuff, it's not really that consequential, but the fact that Michelle Obama was not there, Karen Pence, the former vice president's wife, the former second lady who served under Trump during the first term, was not there, and also Nancy Pelosi, which that may be because of the situation in California, I don't know, but I want to get some of your thoughts on why those 3 women were not present.
Well, Karen Pence and Michelle Obama, it was a statement. There's no doubt about that. And you ask, well, how do you know that for sure? I guess technically we don't know it for sure because we're not inside their head, Trey. But having said that, think about Karen Pence at Jimmy Carter's funeral. Donald Trump passed by. Mike Pence got up. She did not. She sat there, didn't make even eye contact with him. Then you put the fact that he walks out there by himself today. That, listen, I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm not the brightest bulb in the shack, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out, that she was making a statement. Michelle Obama, same thing. She wasn't at Jimmy Carter's funeral. She was on Hawaii on vacation. I'm sorry. Do they not have planes that can go from Hawaii to Washington? Did I miss that? So, she wasn't there at Jimmy Carter's funeral, and now again there today, which, by the way, was a bit of a cringe-worthy moment when Barack Obama walks out there by himself. It was like Laura Bush and George W. Bush. It was Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. Even they're walking out together. And then Barack Obama comes out by himself. Yikes. That was kind of weird. So anyhow, the point is, those 2 events taken together will clearly suggest a statement, or making a statement. You can make the argument that it was a scheduling conflict for one of them. Not when it's 2 in a row. As for Nancy Pelosi, I think it was partly a statement for sure. She doesn't want to go to that. And I know she has the injury with her hip and everything. So maybe she has a little bit more of an excuse. But having said that, she should have shown up for sure. But anyhow, that's my take.
All right. Well, I just had to hop back in and hop out, but here I am. You are watching CBN News, continuing coverage of the inauguration of President Donald J. Trump. As I mentioned, only the second person to have the distinction of 2 different presidential numbers, 45 and 47. Thank you all for being here. All right, David, we talked a little bit earlier today on this channel, but about all these executive orders that are coming. Yeah. I would assuming, obviously, these were all drafted in advance. Do we have any indication? Have you heard anything about what the number is going to be and what we can expect to hear in the coming hours, I guess, today, since a lot of them are supposed to drop today?
Well, it should be any moment now that we're going to get those. They're going to be signed there at the White House, the first batch. The second batch, we understand, will be signed over at Capital One Arena, where he should be arriving soon, a little later. He's going to actually sign some over there, we understand. But I'm just trying to get the latest here because there have been some that look to be released. And I'm just double checking, but yeah, I don't want to say anything specifically yet about what has been and what has not been released. But what's interesting to me, Dan, is that have you ever seen an inaugural address where a president of the United States starts to lay out literally in detail, executive order after executive order, what he's going to do? Normally, it's more sweeping. I'm going to take steps on immigration. I'm going to do that. He didn't say that. He literally started laying out, I'm going to end catch and release. I'm going to reinstall Mexico City policy, or all of that. Remain in Mexico. I said Mexico City policy. I'm getting my global gag rule confused. Remain in Mexico. So we don't know quite yet, but we know it's all coming. In terms of the number, once again, I've heard 100 or so. I think the key word is or so, because we don't know. It could be more than 100. I do know that within energy, specifically with energy development, we're hearing 35 plus just on energy alone. So it's kind of like what they're calling omnibus executive orders. In other words, a barrel of them all at once, specifically in different areas. So that's kind of what we're hearing.
Yeah, when you look at what he's proposing, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, the things he wants to do, and you look at that mandate we were talking about, the issues that drove the massive turnout for him, what most surprises you or intrigues you about the matchup between what he's talking about and what the people want?
Well, I think that, he's matching what the people want. And I say the people, I want to be very careful about this, right, Billy? Because, we live in a divided country. And one of my pet peeves is when a president, whether Democrat or Republican, says the American people believe. No, hold on for a second. Maybe half the American people believe, or at least half of the half that are paying attention. So I think we do need to take it with a grain of salt as to what the American people want. Now, having said that, for those that voted, Donald Trump is simpatico with what they're viewing in this country as it relates to immigration, especially. That's going to be number one. It's going to be immigration. Yes, the economy, of course. Yes, energy, which goes hand in hand with the economy. But I think that's really the key. I do want to look at a bit of not breaking news necessarily, but we are seeing some pictures from Capital One, some still pictures come in, and he's got a desk on stage at Capital One Arena. He is going to sign some of these executive orders literally on stage in front of 20,000 people. I mean, this is just, leave it to Trump, right? I mean, it's not even like he's in the locker room, the Wizards or Capitals locker room backstage signing them with a camera. No, he'll do it in front of 20,000, and they've rolled out the desk now onto the Capital One stage. So get ready for that signing ceremony. But in answer to your question, Billy, I think he tracks. Did I answer the question? I don't know. I'm kind of in another land right now. I hope I answered.
You did. No, I mean, you said he was matching up to the wants of the people, but we'll put that in quotes based on your caveat there, because I think that's true. And I think that's an important thing. That's why he won, right? So I'm interested to see how much of that he lives out consistently beyond day one.
Yeah, and I just want to say one thing. I think it's important to understand that MAGA is MAGA for now, but what was it back in the day? I mean, I believe that in 2008, this is when it all really started. It was with Sarah Palin, when she was John McCain's running mate, right? I mean, she was kind of that breath of fresh air, and then she ushered in the Tea Party in 2010. I mean, that was MAGA before MAGA was MAGA. So it was Sarah Palin was the prequel. I think the Tea Party was the original movie. I think Donald Trump is the sequel to the Tea Party. And here we are with MAGA. He's got a starring role, by the way, just the way he likes it. And then I think we find out what the trilogy entails. What's next after Trump, which we're not going to talk too much about today, but I see this as a trilogy. Tea Party, MAGA, and then what's next. Is what's next the kind of sweet spot? When I say the sweet spot, a lot of folks in MAGA will say, well, we are in the sweet spot. Sure, you can make that argument. But I'm talking about how do you fuse kind of modern or traditional Reagan conservatism with, populist MAGA. And I think that could be the incarnation, if you will, or the iteration, I should say, that is the trilogy, which could be a Ron DeSantis. It could be a J.D. Vance. It could be someone like that. I don't think it's going to be a Mike Pence, clearly. I don't think it's going to be a Nikki Haley. I think that train has left the station, because I don't think there's a reboot to where we were. But I do think there is like I said, an iteration of MAGA, and I think that's the trilogy. So that's the way I see it.
Kind of piggybacking on that, David, I think sometimes when we look at Trump, it's similar to Obama had a similar effect, right? When Obama was not on the ticket, there was trouble with getting, being successful at the ballot box. I think similarly, when Trump is not on the ticket, there is sometimes a little bit of trouble being successful at the ballot box. Obviously, this is his second term. He won't be president again after this. So how does the MAGA movement, or whatever it morphs into, as you were saying in this trilogy, when it morphs, how can they, maybe the Republican Party, work at transitioning that leadership role to Vance or whoever comes next and still be successful without Trump at the helm?
I think that's going to be, Trey, it's such a great question. I think it's going to be very difficult. It's the MAGA challenge ahead. This idea that Trump made Vance the VP, everybody's kind of running with the easy narrative, like, well, there's the mantle. He's kind of making Vance the next guy in charge, and that, well, maybe so, but Vance isn't Trump. And because of that, and when I say Vance isn't Trump, I'm talking about two ways. One, from a personality perspective, which is the biggest one. And two, just from a policy perspective, he's mostly with Trump, but not fully on board with everything Trump does, and especially the way Trump does it. And, I really believe the problem here, Trey, and you're so onto this, it's a great point, which is that Donald Trump is that outsider, right? He's the billionaire who speaks like a cab driver. I mean, he's a guy that just oozes authenticity because he just is the inside voice that everybody has but won't say, but he will. And J.D. Vance is not going to be that guy. He just isn't, because J.D. Vance is his own man, and that's fine. But you're going to have a fallout. You're going to have a drop. You're going to have a drop. And I think the only way you can basically accommodate for that is you're going to have to get really creative at the Republican National Committee and other places like Michael Whatley and others at the RNC to make sure somehow Trump's message really resonates even further. They're going to have to do a lot more work in that area from a get out the vote aspect. And you're going to need people like Charlie Kirk, and whether it be Elon Musk, we'll see about Elon Musk in 4 years, but you're going to need those type of people to step to the plate yet again and not just say, well, Trump's done, and so I'm going to take my foot off the pedal. I think if they take their foot off the pedal, they're in trouble. But I think if they understand what's at stake for this country, then they hopefully will put their money where their mouth is and kind of propel MAGA into this new stratosphere. But, that's going to be tough. Now, the good news is that as much as we make this about Trump, and believe me, Trump loves to make it about himself, I'm not convinced necessarily that MAGA is all in this just for Donald Trump. These are people going back to the Tea Party that made a difference because they are we the people. They understand that freedom is in jeopardy, and our culture is in jeopardy, and our Constitution's in jeopardy. So the basis for the groundswell is still there. I just think that you're going to need the tactics and the money to continue that, and even more so if Trump's not going to be on the ballot, which he won't.
It's going to be a really interesting 4 years in a lot of ways. Number one, I think we're all praying for the safety and protection of President Trump. I mean, you can't help but think of what happened on the campaign trail and just pray that God continues to protect him, because, just given how divided this country it is, I just wouldn't be surprised if another crazy person tries something crazy. And I just pray that that's not the case, obviously. Right. And so that is a big concern there. But also, I noticed in this speech that Trump multiple times, he said God spared him for a reason. He also said forcefully, we will not forget our Constitution, and we will not forget our God. And I thought it was interesting that he added that, right? Because there are ways to talk about faith. There are ways to invoke the name of God without. The way he said it there, it just reminded me of Scripture, of like what you see in the Old Testament, where people, are called to all the time, cry out to God, turn back towards God. And our nation clearly in the last 4 or so years or more have been turning away from God. I mean, embracing these worldly ideologies like the crazy gender stuff, where we have 800 genders in these blatantly untrue things that fly in the face of what our eyes see. And so for a call to say we will not forget our God, I took that as we're turning back to God here. We're not going to just leave him out of the room and then come up with be our own kings and come up with our own thoughts and our own ways on how to rule things. Do you get that same sense, David?
I do. I think that's such a great point. And let's also remember, God uses imperfect people to accomplish his perfect will. And Donald Trump is exhibit A of that. I mean, if King David were running today for office, how many CNN headlines would we have about all the commandments that he broke? But God uses imperfect people to accomplish his perfect will. And what does that mean? Well, beyond using imperfect people, how about imperfect ways necessarily, or mechanisms to get it done? In other words, you're not going to see Donald Trump going around quoting Bible verses and saying, let's turn to 1 Chronicles 7:14. You're just not going to do that, or he's not going to do that. But what he is going to do is he understands from a cultural perspective that if you don't have God as the forefront, as the center of it all, it's all going to be crumbling down. And this comes, I wrote a book about this called The Faith of Donald Trump. And it all comes from his upbringing. Born in 1946, I mean, this is a guy that went to church under Norman Vincent Peale, who had that very famous book at the time in the 50s, The Power of Positive Thinking. So, you fuse that along with God on the throne, Jesus plus nothing, and you get this version of Donald Trump that is old school, that understands the tradition behind it and making sure that there's an optimism behind it. So you put God and optimism and all of that together, and that's Donald Trump's, the way he operates, the way he thinks. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, also his friendship with Paula White, which extends, as you know, David, many years back. And that, I think, also influences the way he sees faith in a lot of these issues, particularly on the positive thinking front. But I wanted to go back to something you were saying before here about, that it wouldn't be a Nikki Haley, probably this trilogy, the third part of it, that it wouldn't be. I mean, is there any world in which the pendulum swings back, because that's what happens, and you have a situation where a J.D. Vance or another Trump-like figure needs a Nikki Haley as VP, or needs somebody to help sort of temper because of the pendulum swing? Is there any scenario where there's sort of a partial Nikki Haley or someone like her, or a Mike Pence?
Yes, I think, Billy, I think that's a good point. Sure, that could be a pendulum swing. I don't think it's going to be specifically Nikki Haley or a Mike Pence in this MAGA world. They are, as you know, Billy, Mike Pence and Nikki Haley are just not going to, how do we say this, not kosher in the MAGA world, for sure. So I don't think it's going to be them necessarily, but someone that can balance J.D. Vance's isolationist tendencies. I call it isolationist. I kind of bought into the propaganda a little bit, but some of his populist tendencies, sure, I could see that. But obviously we're getting ahead of ourselves, but I do think that could be a possibility. I can tell you this, that the Mike Pences and the Nikki Haleys of the world don't believe a word I just said. They believe that not only that they could be a good complement to a J.D. Vance, they actually believe that they have a chance after Trump to, how do I say this, kind of take back the party to the Reagan roots of the party. So that's why you have Mike Pence with this political action committee that he's involved in. You have Nikki Haley kind of biding her time, waiting to get back in. And I believe, depending on world events, you could see them make a resurgence. But at this point, it feels like the populist train has left the station, and the Republican Party has really changed forever. Let me be clear. When I say forever with Donald Trump, but forever ... with a caveat to say, look, parties have gone back and forth throughout history. So we'll see if this is really a forever thing. But I think in the near term, 20 years, 40 years, 50 years, yeah, I think the Republican Party is going to be different.
All right. We appreciate all of you so much for being here watching CBN News' continuing coverage of President Trump. 47 this time, President Trump's inauguration today. And if you missed it, if you missed the earlier swearing in and everything else that happened, then go ahead. You can check out the CBN News YouTube channel. Look at our earlier coverage. We have the whole feed there. We're going to be posting Trump's full speech just by itself, isolated as well. So you can go back and rewatch that as well. David Brody, thanks so much for stopping by here and joining us. Really appreciate it, sir.
Anytime, guys. Good to see you.
All right. Take care. Also, Trey, Billy, thank you guys for being here and breaking down everything we saw today. Of course, we're going to be continuing to cover what happens in the coming days, weeks, months here on the CBN News YouTube channel. Also, make sure you subscribe to the Quick Start podcast. That is the podcast that myself, Billy, Trey host. Also, Madison Seals is on there every weekday morning. You can get that on cbnnews.com. You can get the link to that as well. So appreciate you all being here, and God bless you, and have a fantastic rest of your day. God bless.